What I thought would be interesting to do was, now that we are kind of affixed in 6 railroads in the U.S. and Canada and Mexico. First one alphabetically is the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to look in a little bit more detail at the components that were there in 1950. The Chicago Burlington and Quincy. Okay, this is the early Zephyr.
Yep.
But they've obviously modified this thing. They've added a car and put this great big Mars light up on top and done some other things, but it still is basically the 900 horsepower diesel. It was lightweight, very streamlined, so 900 horsepower, and moved this thing along at about 100 miles an hour. So you guys do see the Zephyr, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, just double checking. This was a special one they built. This was the last of the shovel nose, again, shovel nose Zephyrs. It has a truck from an E unit and then a baggage compartment, and it was full size. So they were starting to build, they realized the small ones were just too inflexible. And so I think this was the General Pershing Zephyr or something like that.
World War One.
This
Following World War One.
Yeah, this would be the 30s. And I think it ran from St. Joseph to Omaha or something like that, or Kansas City to Omaha or something like that, or Kansas City to Lincoln. And it ran for years.
A couple miscellaneous things. Are brass engines still in vogue with a lot of people?
Yes.
A lot of guys like them. Okay.
Some guys do like it, but with the really quality stuff, the plastics are doing, they're just.
Yeah. And for a long time, you could make those in brass ones. You could get something you couldn't get in plastic.
Yeah.
That was one of the original reasons.
So,
okay. And then
here we see the California Zephyr today, and so somebody's got a private car in the back. Those things run, I think, to buy something, the private car like that, I think it'd be $4 or $5 million. So they're in demand. Here's
looks familiar.
I think this would be probably maybe the Blackhawk, or after the mail was taken off, and it's coming in early in the morning into Minneapolis. So that's crossing the Stone Arch Bridge. And so they were looking pretty ratty by 1970. Here's a E unit on the triple track in Chicago West, and it has some bi-levels and some regular coach passengers. The Burlington had a lot of branch lines, as I talked about, and as we saw on the map. And so very early on, they eliminated their steam, because to run a steam locomotive with 2 cars or a car would be very expensive compared to this thing. And these early, they weren't diesels, they were distillate, but or even big gasoline engines, but they were very reliable. And so they were very low cost to operate. So that kept the branch lines going for a long time. So here they're unloading less than carload freight, and here they're unloading the mail, and here's the less than carload freight, and there's the passengers. So they were very versatile. And here's one later.
Other factor is you didn't have as many freeways that far west at that time.
Exactly. So the roads weren't very good. I remember when we went when I was a kid in the 50s, we would drive to Glacier Park, and part of long stretches of Highway 2 were gravel. I mean, it was full of gravel, so you certainly couldn't move along too fast, and you had to be really careful, because trucks would come by and you get a chip in your windshield, so and they didn't have a safe light to come out and do this fancy replacement they do now. That'd be a expensive project. So this is at Minneapolis, north of the depot, and he's backing the train up into this is an E5. You can tell by the slope nose, and you can see from those early shovel noses. I don't blame them. Can you imagine sitting there going 90 miles an hour,
watching a truck
sitting
pass
right here, and a dump truck pulls in front of you? I mean, it would be. And so the crews were really complaining. It's not so bad if you're on a track someplace that doesn't have grade crossings, but if you got grade crossings, it's pretty bad. So anyway, they came up with this E5 and slope nose, and it was the automotive guys at General Motors that designed it. It basically looks like a a Chevrolet, big Chevrolet. And the crews loved it because they're sitting way up high here. They got great big beams there. And you'd run into trains and other stuff like that. And oftentimes the crews wouldn't be hurt that badly. So it was certainly psychologically better. And Burlington enthusiasts told me what this is. This is to represent those windows. Initially they were black, but that's to represent the windows in front. And then this is to represent the air grates that were above the windows. See, they had air grates up here, and then they had windows.
Yeah.
And I never realized that. I was kind of thought the stripes were nice, but I didn't realize they actually meant something. So, and then here's an E7 in the back. Now later on, they didn't buy them stainless. These are all stainless steel, but later on they just bought regular and painted them silver.
Oh.
And Burlington was an early user of diesels. They had a lot of them. They had a lot of passenger trains, and so and then they bought a lot of F units too, because they bought them early. They bought the Burlington and the Santa Fe and some of the others bought F units early because Nebraska's relatively dry, and then you get out in Colorado and the others in Wyoming and it's really dry. They were very progressive. Now here shows one of the F units on its I think the 168A. In fact, I think Carl Rasmussen said that was the last F unit running around for some reason, because they traded a lot of them in on like GP35s and the other units. So here's this is an F7, an F3B, and I won't tell you which phase. The rail fans come up with 7 different phases of F3s.
Yeah.
And this is a GP35 and that's a GP20.
When they trade units in, what's the point of trading it in? Do they reuse the trucks and traction motors, or
They often do, yeah. And they can use some components, and they give them a heck of a good credit.
Okay. All right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So then here's the SW1, which was down at La Crosse. Took that when I was down there with Carl Rasmussen in 1969. And here's I love that BN number 1. It used to be numbered the 94 or something, 94 or 36 or something, and then BN, they had 2 of them, so they numbered them 1 and 2. So for switching a small town or an industrial park, it's a good locomotive. Another SW1, and here is a NW2, and so that's 1,000 horsepower. And here's these were TR2s. We talked about that a little bit last time. Just to review quickly, these were actually a cow and calf. So there was an A unit and a B unit, and then Burlington wanted the flexibility, so they sent them back to General Motors to put new cabs on them, cabs on the B units. And so then if you're, for many years, there were 2 or 3 of these in lash-ups running around the city, because the Burlington trains would come into the Dayton's Bluff Yard, which is southeast of downtown Minneapolis, and then they would run transfer runs. Like, for example, this one's going to Lyndale Avenue, which is in west of Minneapolis. They'd go to the Sioux line, they go to the Milwaukee, they go to the Great Northern, they go to the NP. They went all over the city. So they had transfer runs. They had about 14 of those things in town. Here's one. This is at St. Anthony before they ripped everything out. This is in the winter of 1969. And there's 3 of them. And they're going to go to the, looks like they're probably going to the Northwestern.
And you can see the sag. You can see the train where they did hit the sag to go under the bridge.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Raise the bridge, they lower the
double
river.
stack sag.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
lowered
I
the
figured it
river.
was easier to sag the track than it was to raise the bridge.
Yeah. So, and then some more switchers, and then we'll get into the bigger units. Zip through here. Now these are that's a GP7, and that's a GP9. It's a passenger GP9. As you can see, they have the vent, and there's the exhaust for the steam boiler, because Burlington had a lot of branch lines, and some of them they would use the gas electrics on, but a lot of them they'd have to actually pull a train. Here's a SD9, and it also has a steam boiler
Ah,
because they had so many branch lines. So here's a freight version of the SD9, or excuse me, that's an SD7. Yeah, the Burlington actually put the nameplates on it, so it actually SD7. So it's 1,500 horsepower. And some of these they bought for pulling out in the mountains. And so this is a heavy one, so they probably bought that for. But they also brought some very lightweight ones because there's some of the branch lines that had very light track. So, and here's a GP40 with an E unit. They were an early buyer of the GP20. This is basically a GP9, and then Union Pacific had been experimenting. They had the Air Research Company, and they actually just put a turbocharger on the locomotive, and that raised the horsepower from 1,750 to 2,000 because the Union Pacific was just so hungry for horsepower. And so they built some, and then they talked General Motors into building some, and so Burlington got a whole bunch. Man.
Santa Fe had a bunch too, didn't they?
Yes, they had a whole slew of them. Yeah, here's some more. And you can see the fans are bigger than on the GP9 because, of course, you have to get rid of that heat. Bigger dynamic brakes. This has a winterization hatch. And they got rid of they used to have a kind of chicken wire thing here. They put a grill on that. They're gradually modernizing these things.
So they actually split the radiator and put some up behind the cab, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the only unit they did that on.
Yeah, because it's basically when they went from the GP9, the F7, which had 4 fans right here,
Right.
to the GP7, they put half the radiator over here and half the radiator over there.
Okay, yeah.
So the GP7, GP9, and GP20 all had that split radiator. You're right.
Wasn't that kind of a maintenance headache?
A little bit, yeah. There was, but I suppose they'd come out of the water pumps, and they maybe ran one water pump to one radiator and one to the other. I don't know. But Craig's right. They then when they did the SDs, they put it all in one spot. Now this is an SD24. They've used that same principle that they used on the GP20. Here's the turbocharger, and you can see the bulge here. They didn't have room in the hood, so the turbocharger is sitting there spinning, and so this one actually they got up to 2,400 horsepower. So they really they raised the compression ratio and everything. They had to do this because the General Motors was quite late with a 2,400 horsepower locomotive. Alco had produced one in 1954, as did Fairbanks Morris with their Trainmaster. And so meanwhile, General Motors is cruising along with their 1,700 horsepower SD9, and they were starting to lose some sales. So they said, gee, we better build this thing. So in 1959, they built the SD24.